Hi, I'm Erin Sarofsky.
And I'm Austin Shaw.
This is Between the Keyframes.
This week we're going to talk about 1099s. I need an accountant.
I need an accountant. I need to send invoices. Yes. Yeah. This talk about 1099 in freelance in general, independent contractor, it's called a lot of different things, but they're basically the same thing, is a continuation of our last week's episode, which is about focusing on the pros and cons of being full-time, things to think about when maybe to make the shift here into freelance, the things that you should know.
Let's talk about freelance.
Let's talk about
First
freelance.
Off, freelance ain't free.
It's expensive. It's expensive. And we, as business owners, we pay a premium to get this person in the chair working. Boom, like that. Like, they're like an assassin.
Right. You're a mercenary.
You're a mercenary. You're coming in for this specific role to knock this out of the park. And there's a little less nonsense that we accept from a freelancer, you know.
Yeah,
because,
or no nonsense.
Well, a little less.
Unless they're a junior.
Creative. Yeah.
Right. Unless they're, you know, and if they're a junior freelance, I think it's usually understood. The expectations aren't going to be the same on a junior.
Aren't going to be the same, but then their rate is different.
Well, that's where rate, you know, and I talk about this with students all the time. It's like, you know, I'm like, if you start at a lower rate, you've got a lot less pressure and a lot more leniency on your expectations. If you're a baller and you want a senior or near senior rate right off the bat,
right,
you got to back that up. You got to, you know, no dropping the ball. No, I don't know how to do this. You got to really deliver, right?
Yeah. I mean, when you have somebody come in with like a significant rate, and they're just like clueless. When you come into a studio as a freelancer, we're expecting you're bringing all of your knowledge to the table from other places, from other studios, from your like vast knowledge. And yeah, we have a set way of doing things, but we're going to expect a much more varied expertise.
Yeah. And I think, you know, a true, I don't know if that's the right word, but I guess just an experienced freelancer, somebody who's done it. I think we'll have that. You know, you get very much that Swiss Army knife kind of, because you have that varied experience, because you've worked at a lot of different places with a lot of different people, you tend to have a broader knowledge base in that sense, at least, or at least a broader, not knowledge, but experience base.
Well, that's the experience factor too, then.
Yeah.
You can kind of see it coming.
I mean, that's interesting because I hadn't really thought about that from the hiring entity's point of view, what you just described. I mean, but it makes sense. It does. And it, you know, the other thing that I wanted to jump back on was the studios, my sense is that the studios, yes, they pay a premium for the freelancers, but they're also like, when you don't need to fill that workstation, right?
Right.
Like, you're not paying a salary on somebody who's just hanging out when it's not as busy, right? So it's like the ability to like have your core team on staff who can take care of business and kind of keep the wheels turning all the time. Yeah. And then staff up with freelance as needed, right? And to be able to kind of ride the waves of busyness versus not as busy.
So I think probably a number one benefit that I've heard you say is that you get to keep more of your money.
Yeah, taxes, right? No, there is I honestly feel like it's a bit of an unfair benefit because, you know, you mentioned earlier when you're working as a freelancer, you're working essentially as an independent contractor, you're working as a business entity. And because of that, you are able to essentially operate the same way that any business does, and especially the largest businesses who have a lot of influence in how tax law is written to their benefit. So I always look at it as a freelancer can ride on the coattails of the big business kind of tax laws. And so what that means, like you talked about earlier, yes, like if there's a conference and the freelancer wants to go to that conference, they got to pay for that themselves. But that's also 100% tax deductible, right? So that, you know, the admission to the conference, the travel to the conference, all of it, right? That's a write-off. That's a tax write-off. you still got to pay for it. That's still money out of your pocket, but it is,
as my accountant says, you're still spending the money, Erin.
You're still, yes, this is true, but there are,
benefits.
There are benefits. Your hardware, your software, your studio space, any kind of creative research you're doing, reference design, art and reference books you're buying,
right, going to movies,
all of it, right? It's all part of your cost of doing business that you could include in your taxes. So, I always break with students. I'm like, if you're on a salary, you're a W-2, you're getting paid $100K a year, you're getting taxed on that $100K. It's coming right out of every paycheck. You're getting taxed like a third. And there's no wiggle room, right?
Yeah.
It's done. If you're working as a freelancer and you add up all your 1099s at the end of the year and they equal $100K, and then you add up all your business expenses and they equal $50K, you're only paying $50K. You're only paying tax on that adjusted income, right? So you're keeping more of your tax money.
Okay, but you're also doing that accounting, right? Like now you're tracking your receipts. You have to be pretty organized.
Yeah, no, it does. It means you do need to. It's a bit more responsible. That is a benefit, I'd say, of the W-2. You don't have to do any of that, right? You could use TurboTax. Like I use an accountant. I've used an accountant every year essentially that I've been in business.
And that's a couple grand.
Because it's Well, it can be if you're like an S corp. S corp, the corporation is expensive. LLC not so bad, but it's an expense, but it's a tax deductible expense. It really is. Every time I pay my accountant the following year, it's a deduction.
Deductible.
It's
tax deductible.
It's tax deductible, right? So I think freelance. Personally, I think it's somewhat of a personality thing. Like if it's the right
you're
fit,
an advocate.
But I'm also like, I don't necessarily say it's for everybody. There are some people, it's just like, if you can't kind of manage the anxieties, the uncertainties, especially in the beginning,
right?
It can be stressful. I mean, it's not necessarily for everyone. But I remember I really wanted to get a W-2 job right off the bat. And when I first got started, it was, the places I was working, the places like Curious Pictures, like all of the, I was working as a junior freelancer there, and everyone on staff was either like a 3D artist or like like more of almost a VFX compositor, right? And the designers were all freelance. They didn't have staff designers. They had directors, but it was... And I was like, I would have loved to have gotten a job right off the bat, but all I was getting was freelance work. And then things kind of shifted when all the studios, like the PSYOP and Brand New School and all this Trollback, and everybody started the departure from the post-production model, right? And the design-driven models started coming in. Then you started seeing the flip side, where it was like staff designers, freelance animators, But by that point, I started getting offers, and I was like, I kind of like this freelance thing, Like I like, by that time, it's like my rate was getting to be more intermediate, and I remember talking to some people on staff when I freelance at places, and they'd just be like, they'd ask me, they're like, so how do you like this freelance thing? Like, how do you like? I'm like, I like it, it's cool, and you could see them, their wheels turning, and they're just like, no, I can't like deal with not knowing, can't deal without the benefits. And at that time it was like Freelancers Union. I don't know if you know about the Freelancers Union, but that was a big thing in New York in the 2000s. It was basically a group that formed just so that freelancers could get health insurance.
Yeah, right? That's great.
So this is pre-Affordable Care Act, pre-Obamacare. So it's like, if I wanted to get health insurance, I either had to go through, I think the first thing I did, I went through just like a private insurance person. But then when the freelancers, when the Freelancers Union came out, it was like I sent a fax. Remember those things, fax? And I faxed all my documents, and I got into the Freelancers Union, and I was able to get on a plan, And by the way, health insurance as a freelancer, 100% tax deductible.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And I just paid, but it was like, as a young single guy in New York in the mid 2000s, it was like $350 a month for my health insurance. And then I was by that time, my rate was probably like $450 a day. So it would be like, if I'm permalancing, like one day, I've already paid my health insurance with one day. You know, I'm paying $1,000 a month in my apartment in New York City. It's like, okay, 2 days, by 4 days of working in a month, I'm like, I've paid my health insurance and paid my rent, So it was sort of getting adapted to just trusting that I was in the mix, and getting booked and it was a lot of hustle back then, because it was, I'd do a booking, it would end, and then I'd freak out because I'd be like, oh my God, I guess I have to find another career now, and then I'd hustle, and then I get a booking, and then it would end, and then I'd freak out, but then I get another booking, and then once you kind of cross the tipping point, you're just getting, then I'm turning down stuff. Yeah,
well, because once you're in a groove and you have clients, it's like,
Well, and in that time, it was like once you're in the sort of the freelance talent pool and you're building your reputation,
everybody's finding out about you.
There's a tipping point where you go from like hustle, which is a lot in the beginning and a lot of self-advocacy. Then it's like you can work as much or as little as you want, right? Like, because you're basically turning down work, you're referring your friends, you're basically saying, thank you so much for reaching out, but I am not available, but please keep me in mind for the future, or I will let you know when my availability opens up.
Right.
And then it's just like, then you're just on the train.
Okay, so let me ask this question. How do you decide on your rate?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I was told my rate at first. So my first rate was $200 a day. Okay. I was told. I was working as an intern, and I won a pitch, and the pitch was for a pretty big commercial. And the head of CG, she said, we're going to pay you $200 a day for every day you work on this job, because, it's not right for us to not do that, because you paid us a bunch of money. So I was like, all right, awesome. So my rate at the beginning, it was really just kind of being told by a supervisor. And then it was meeting and talking to other freelancers. How much are you charging? And then they're like, I'm charging $300 a day. And I'm like, oh, we're kind of like the same skill set and experience, so I guess my rate is now $300 a day. And then so it's a lot. That was how I did it. It was talking to other freelancers, finding out, and then after a year goes by, if I'm at a permalance position and they're and I'm there for a half a year, sometimes I would negotiate like, oh, can $450? How about $400 if we do a 3-month booking? Okay.
Oh, sure. There you go. Yeah.
And there's that sort of whole intermediate, and for me, for a long time, and like getting to $500 a day was because that was with the senior people.
Yeah.
When I was a junior, I was like, how much does the senior? Talking to the producers, how much do the senior people make? They're like, oh, we pay them $500 a day. I'm like, okay, that's my goal.
500. Yeah, that's a goal. Okay.
And then getting to that point, and then it's then you hear about some freelancer who's like charging $600 a day, and you're like, shit, I'm gonna charge $600 a day, and then I was like, oh, it's been a year at $600, it's time to go to $650, and then it's like, oh, it's time to go to $700, and then on and on and on, and then like I still have and I think I have some friends in New York who are up to like $900 a day for like agent, for After Effects stuff and agencies, but I know some studios are not going to pay that.
Well, we can't afford it. That's that's a lot of money for.
You sort of cap out at certain, and I think it starts who you talking to and which industry and which is hiring you, and yeah.
So, have you ever heard about people charging different rates for different places? Because I caught wind of that, and I would be really upset if I found out we were being charged more than somebody else. Yeah.
No, I haven't heard that. I've
never
heard that. I mean, I've had people like, I tell them my rate, and I mean, and they'd ask if I can do, this has been a long time ago, but can we do this? And
negotiate.
Then it was up to me, like, do I want to work with this studio? Is it somebody who's hired me before and I enjoy right? I enjoy the culture, I enjoy the work. Or they just have like, hey, this budget is we only have this much. Can you do it for? And then it's really up to. But it's like, I had to learn how to be a mercenary and
like an advocate for yourself. Yeah,
exactly. Like I had,
and where your line was, your line is a certain place. Like, we can ask for anything. It's up to you to decide what your value is. So
exactly. It very much is like, there's not a lot of the lines are not nearly as clear, I feel like, in that freelance world. You have to figure a lot of that out. And the way I did that was talking to other freelancers and also talking to producers who were working at places and also talking to those freelance producers, because they're sort of doing the same thing. They're doing the same but thing. As producers, you know.
Has somebody ever just like not paid you or tried to like unbook you after they booked you or anything like that?
Yeah, I haven't had any of those kinds of horror stories. I've heard of some, but it's like you said, the same way that your freelancer reputation is you got to keep that golden. Same thing with the studio. Like if a studio stiffs their freelancers, that's going to go around real quick and nobody's going to take bookings there, right? Yeah. I've had like, hey, like this project's gone away, you know, can we release your booking without a kill fee? And it's kind of, and then it's up to me to be like, all right, do I want to do them a solid and kind of tell them I'm doing them a solid and say, just make sure you get me on the next one. Yeah, because I really want to work with you guys. So it's cool, but definitely, you know, book me on the next job because I'm hungry.
Yeah.
If you're working with legitimate studios and legitimate brands and companies, like I've never had an issue. It's always those fringy, weird, like people who don't really understand the industry. They're sort of on the fringe of it. That's where I've heard things get odd and horrible.
Well, I mean, we've all
you do sometimes. I've had to wait like longer than I wanted to wait to get paid sometimes, but I've always gotten paid. But you do need to sort of learn how to manage a prudent reserve. So a prudent reserve, right? You got to have some money in the bank, you know.
Well, and that's something that studios go through all the time. I mean, this is something a freelancer probably has never heard from a studio or a company, but this thing called sequential liability. So as a studio, if an agency hires us, sometimes there's this terminology in the contract that says that. And that means that we do not get paid until they get paid. So like Swarovski is now waiting for client to pay agency to pay us. Well, these are like, could be hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through these companies. And they're like, yeah, but our client didn't pay us the $50,000. So neither you or the audio company are getting anything. But we still now have freelancers that we've hired and payroll and all the things. So we also need an ample reserve. But every once in a while, you just get this like weird moment where like all your clients, you're just like calling everybody going like, somebody needs to pay us because we got bills to pay.
We got to pay people. Yeah.
Yeah. And they have all sorts of jinky rules just so that they can keep money on the table a little longer.
Right.
Because they have like investor moments or milestones or things like that. So like we'll hear everything from like, well, one of the other vendors on the job hasn't submitted an invoice yet. So we're waiting to disperse funds for that. So like, okay, because it hasn't sent you a $4,000 invoice, like I gotta wait on $100,000, like, or 200 or 400, something crazy like that.
Right.
They really kind of create an environment. A lot. I don't want to say they, as in all agencies or clients do that, because some are incredible, like incredibly fast to a point where you're like, it doesn't seem real, you know. But there are the ones that just make it really, really, really hard to get money out of them.
Right. And I've like noticed like even as a freelancer, like people who pay fast versus people who always drag it out, that creates or detracts goodwill in my willingness to work for them. So I remember like the first time I freelanced with Superfat, I got a check in like 2 days after I submitted an invoice. I was like, what? Like, how did that happen? Literally, like I submitted the invoice and they must have processed and put the check in the mail. And that created such a sense of goodwill that I was like, nice. Where there were like other shops where, 30 days go by. Okay.
Yeah.
45 days go by. Hey. 60 days go by. Hey.
Yeah.
Right? 75 days go by. It's like, all right, why am I working as hard to get paid that I did on the job I actually did for you? That's not cool.
Well, and I think that it's like a really important thing for freelancers to understand. They got to keep track of the invoices they're sending out. They got to follow up on them. That is not going to be effortless. And that I think there's like some administrative stuff that they need to be aware of, not just from a tax perspective.
It's true. You have to keep track. I mean, I'm not a fan of paperwork. I've managed a system for myself that works. I mean, it's not rocket science, but you're right. It's like I do have to. If somebody hasn't paid, I have to follow up. It's usually an email. Hey, just checking on this, and usually I'll attach the invoice that I've already submitted and be like, just want to follow up on this.
Yeah.
Let me know. Thank you.
Okay, so I also wanted to talk to you about, like, as a studio, a big thing is developing a brand, awareness to the market that we're here and what we do. Do you feel that, like, you've had to develop a personal brand for being a freelancer, or is it something like everybody just knows Austin and that's that?
Probably more the latter. You know what I mean? I mean, I've had to like create and maintain and revise a website. I think I showed you my first website. It was pretty bad.
They all are.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And it was just like, oh my God, I need to do a website. I'm going to put my work up. This is like, I didn't know HTML. I got someone to help me. It was really bad. And over the years, it's like having to update that. So I've had to, but I don't feel like I've had to make a brand in the same way that maybe a studio would. I think it's probably more of like me as just kind of, I mean, you can if you're really into sort of like identity design and you want to cultivate that, but I've done it more as just like, just Austin, the guy, the guy. Yeah. I mean, have you looked at me as like a brand, or I'm just like the guy? Hey, there's
you're
the
guy. Yeah. But some freelancers kind of start, it seems like building a brand, and that to me is always kind of like when you start seeing that happen, or you start seeing freelancers pair up to tackle projects together, you kind of know that that's the beginning of a business,
of a studio,
of a small
sure.
business. Do you have thoughts on that, about the idea of a freelancer transitioning into a business owner?
Sure. I mean, I did it a little bit. Right? Like I had a little studio. It's called Right On Media Corp. Right? I did that for like when I first went remote. I left New York City. I moved to Westchester, 20 miles north. I made the great exodus, and for a while I just worked out of my apartment, and then when we found out we were going to have a baby, we needed that second bedroom as a nursery. So I actually rented a little studio space like a block away, and I had like a couple workstations, and I got some interns, and I bring some freelancers in, some other Westchester freelancers, and I was doing, and I grossed more money than I had ever made in a year in my life, and I worked harder than I ever had in my life, and I like dangerously burned out, and it was that probably had more to do with me not being great with delegation and boundaries and my own personal issues more so than anything else.
Right.
But it's a lot. I mean, I had to like IT. I had to be like it would be like I go to the Mac store and like pick up a new Mac Pro, and then I'd be back there a week later like I need another Mac Pro, like you know, and you know what, that was during right before the housing crash.
Right. So 07.
I had this insane year, and then where I was doing a lot of broadcast, right? A lot of direct, like basically, and that was the way I saw studios in the 2000s rise, right? They did a whole bunch of show packages for broadcast clients, networks, and then they'd get a commercial, and then they'd start doing agency work. And I was on that path, and then the crash happened, and I was busy, but it was nothing really cool. And then I got the opportunity to actually go into do some in-house freelancing at Superfad. You had left by that point.
Yep.
And then that actually turned into a full-time gig, and I let that studio, my little write-on studio, go. And anyway, so my thoughts on it are, and it's, I think the whole social media, digital media revolution has made it a lot easier for people like where I am now to work as a small operator, because there's all these little deliverables that a one-man studio can really, and I have a broad range, like, 2D, like, I'm all over 2D animation. I can mess with some 3D. If it gets into photoreal 3D, I pass. Right. But it's like, I can take from a concept, design, execute, like any kind of, especially with these, like anywhere from 5 to 15 seconds, it's like multi-platform, lots of versioning, lots of deliverables. Yeah. Like I have a skill set that lets me do pretty well as a small operator, right? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you touched on a lot of the points I was thinking or hoping you would in that answer, is that, and that's as you transition from being a freelancer, main operator guy, who, as it is, you're a freelance business entity. So you're dealing with billing, you're dealing with your software, your hardware, all of your things.
All the jobs.
All the jobs.
Yeah.
Taking that and then turning it into a company with even just a few employees and all of that changes the paradigm completely.
Yeah.
There's a shift, and I think people move into that like very rosy-eyed. I know, because I definitely moved into that very rosy-eyed, and there wasn't like this list of things that I would check off. Like if you went and got an MBA, they would say like, okay, well, you're gonna need to figure out this and you're gonna need to figure out that, and like perhaps if you knew that list existed, like you wouldn't do it. You would just be like, this is my line. This is as far as I'm going as a freelance operator. No, I don't want to turn into a business.
Right.
Because there's all these other responsibilities.
Yeah, that are
come
intense.
With it.
Yeah. And sometimes take you further away from the thing.
The work that you like. Yeah, that thing that you love doing. Yeah.
And occasionally I get projects that are too big, or the deadline's too tight for me to just do totally solo. So then it's just like, boom, I grab a junior or another senior freelancer, and we'll tackle it together. But it's like, it's usually more, there's no like, hey, like we're going to make a studio out of this, right? It's just like,
no, it's just this one and done.
And we're going to get it done. And, and next time something like this happens, we'll do it again. And it's cool. Right.
But it's not like with the intention of keeping that up and going, and that relationship can go into the ether and you never have to work with them again. There's no kind of implication there.
Right.
Yeah. Because that happens.
It's almost like a little band, of mercenaries come together. Get it done.
Totally get it.
And then go away.
What are the good emotional things about, being a freelancer?
Right. I guess I touched on it a little earlier when I was talking about that idea of like when I would consider these full-time offers.
Yeah.
And there's one of the benefits is you can detach, right? There's a built-in detachment where it's like, my booking is over. It is time for me to go, right?
Yeah.
Like there's an easy, and sometimes that, and it, if you really enjoyed it and they don't want to keep you there, it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But that's not really a benefit. But it's like, you just stay out of the politics, you stay out of the personality, you stay out of the drama. Right. Yeah. It's just like, you're less invested in, I guess, if there are negative aspects or just things that you don't want to be.
And you don't feel like you have to fix it. You're like, I'm here. My job is to do this. I'm going to do this. You guys deal with your shit some other time. Yeah. Okay.
So there are probably clearer boundaries about like what's yours, what's not yours. The other one, I would say the exposure and growth, so it's a different trajectory, right? You're on a full-time job, like you come in as a junior, you get promoted, then you become a senior, and then maybe you become an art director or a lead.
Right.
Very different trajectory. You almost have to it's up to you to sort of say like, I am now senior.
I do this. Yeah.
I am like I am an art director, I am a creative director, right? Like,
Right.
and then sometimes it's like I might get hired as a freelancer to come in and creative direct, or I might get hired to come in and just animate something. And
you
know,
have to be okay with that. Yeah. You have to know, like, I'm not the creative director. I'm respecting this other person here who is the creative director.
And so you have to be very flexible and adaptable in that way. But sometimes it's nice too, because sometimes it's like, man, if all I've been doing is just sort of like leading and having to deal at the big level decisions, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I just get to build something. Cool. That's nice. I'm going to spend the next few weeks just building something. You know, it is nice. So I like that variety, but the exposure to all the different talents. So if you're going from different studios, and you're spending enough time there to learn something, to get some knowledge from their senior people, to meet the other freelancers, the other staff, the staff people there. It's almost like, unless you're just completely shut off from everyone, like,
you're quiet.
You can't help but be a bit of a sponge and just learn, and you learn all these tips and tricks. And I tell my students that I'm like all these things I'm showing you, these little tricks I'm showing you in Photoshop or Illustrator or After Effects, C4D, it's like I learned all this stuff from just working with lots of different people. And there is, I think, because motion design is so collaborative, that people are generally pretty good about sharing those, especially on a job where you're trying to get it done, or you know, those early days where you're kind of figuring it out, and then you're like, oh, I'm kind of stuck on this, and then you're like, hey, and then you get someone a little more senior to show you a thing, and then you're like, oh, that's the thing, and then that becomes part of your toolkit. Yeah,
or if you have to jump into somebody's file, you're like, oh, shit, this is great.
Yeah. No, I've had a few moments where it's like getting to work with some, like, you know, like a hero's like file, and getting to see like, oh, that's how they did that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Right? That's like, clutch. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Or like, you know, like getting to work on boards, right? Getting to work with creative directors and them giving you feedback and helping you become a better designer. I mean, I've had that experience with you where it's like, we've pitched on stuff and, you know, you're like, why don't you try this with like a hand-drawn style? And I'm like, okay. And then we, you know, and then we win. And I'm like, cool. Yeah. Like, you helped me become a better designer.
Yeah. Perspectives are good to think about things. I think like the best creative directors are just people that are open to questioning and aren't afraid to kind of even send somebody down a wrong path to experiment. You know, it's interesting.
So I was going to say, it's for people with like a real kind of that free spirited, that you feel like you just want to keep making discoveries. You want some flexibility in maybe your lifestyle too. People who like to travel, or people who maybe want to like a side hustle that's maybe like a passion side hustle, but they also, you know, they're solid design animators who want, you know, who need to make a living. Yeah. It's good for them too. Yeah. So you can, some affordances in that way that you can, you know, if you get to a place, you can balance those things. Like it's not like, I mean, I guess you could do that on day one, but you kind of need to do the grind. You need to go in, you need to go work in-house. Even if you're an in-house freelancer, like go work in-house for a bit.
Yeah. You got to see, you got to
be a sponge.
Check it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the experience factor is essential to evolution. Well, I think, like looking big picture, I think everybody that has listened to this can really benefit from, you know, you were one of the first people that I know that really went freelance, and you've watched the industry change, especially, you know, as you touched on, in a sea of full-timers, you were like the guy out there doing this. So that's super cool. And now I think the mentality has changed completely of the kind of artists that are out there. It's more of a gig mentality. People don't mind that, like, insecurity. There are things like Obamacare and out there, and resources to do 401ks. All of that is, you know.
Oh, I did like a self-employment pension.
Yeah,
I did
like
one of those.
That stuff was harder to figure out back in the day. Now it's like,
oh no, it was really hard. Yeah.
Now it's it seems so easy, and I'm not trying to complain, but like really, there are tools and resources there if you want to go and freelance.
A lot of staff, a lot of people too, like like you said, that idea, I think collectively our culture and our perspective on full-time jobs has changed too, right?
It's completely
it used
different.
to be like, you get a job, you work there for 30 years, you retire, right?
Exactly.
And the idea that if your resume showed too many jobs, like that was a bad thing.
Yeah.
And now it's like, people will go work at a brand on like a creative team in a brand for a couple, 2-3 years, and then they'll jump to another brand and work for a couple, 2-3 years, and jump to another, and it becomes like, they're full time, but they're almost operating like a little bit like freelance full time, like you know what I mean, and that just seems like it's a lot more accepted and maybe even normal.
Yeah. So okay. So this has been a really good talk.
This was fun.
Let's do it again in 2 weeks.
Hope your day is easy ease. E.